Most of what I do here on YouTube is about once a week, just try to distract you for a few minutes from the stresses and busyness of life and to just have a bit of fun together. However, I do have a playlist on my channel called Serious Discussions, where every once in a very long while I tackle some deeper subjects. So if you come here for the fun and games, you might want to skip this video, because today I'm going to not only take you behind the scenes, but to also crack open my own little vault a tiny bit and give you just a real quick glimpse of my own inner workings. So here's the thing with chronic illness. If you were to see me when I was walking around out and about, you would see somebody who maybe has a hint of a dad bod going on, but I like to flatter myself that I look at least relatively in shape, and to see me you might be going, how's that guy on disability? And there is at least one visible clue that's hidden underneath my shirt here, and that is this scar here, which has been opened up twice actually, and they have both times removed a section of my intestines and then kind of joined the ends back together. And in both instances there were some pretty horrible complications, and both surgeries ended up being quite a nightmare. So there is that visible scar there if my shirt is off. What I don't have a scar for is the PTSD and the resulting depression and anxiety that goes along with that. So I guess if my shirt was off, you might see that there is maybe something going on underneath, but other than that, I look relatively normal, I suppose. Now, going back to the most recent video I posted, the last part of that video was recorded on my birthday. And now here's a really fun fact. My wife and I actually share the very same birthday. The day, month, and year are the same for both of us. Apparently, we were born within 2 hours of each other. So our birthdays are quite a fun time to celebrate together. And this year we decided to get some childcare and just go out for a little dinner at a local Thai and Chinese restaurant. And that's something I don't do very often since my second surgery happened. After my first surgery, I did have to restrict my diet a fair bit more than I already was doing for the Crohn's disease. But after my second surgery, I seemed to somehow lose the ability to digest food in any sort of quantity. So I have to be very careful about portion sizes, because if I eat too much food, it makes me quite ill. And I don't know if it's because they have removed a fair bit of bowel over the past 2 surgeries or what the deal with that is. But I was careful about what I ordered. I had a very simple basic noodles, grilled chicken, and shrimp. Nothing too fancy, nothing too spiced up. And it was just a really nice time together. We came home, and a couple of hours later I went to bed and was just starting to drift off to sleep when I felt a bit of diarrhea coming out of me. So I dashed off to the toilet, and from there things went really downhill. Now, one issue my body has is I am not a puker. I simply do not throw up. In the past 20 years, I can only remember a single occasion that was related to flaming Zambuca shots where I ended up throwing up. Other than that, it's not a way that my body reacts to sickness, which is pretty unfortunate, because no matter how severely nauseous I am, I can't seem to purge it out that end. And so I did end up getting severely nauseous, and I will spare you the diarrhea details, because you probably subscribe to this channel for board game stuff and you don't need to hear about that sort of thing. But it was an awful night. I battled on the toilet, just kind of cold and shivering. Every time I managed to get back to bed, get under the covers, start to get warm and comfortable, I would just feel this pain and nausea and have to dash back to the toilet. And that went on for hours. But finally, in the wee hours of the morning, I did fall asleep, and I proceeded to dream that every time I stood up, I felt like I was going to pass out because I was so dizzy and sick. However, just a couple of hours later, I woke up to find myself just soaked in diarrhea. Sorry, I had to talk about that again. But I had to go to the bathroom, do a very extensive cleanup of myself and my bed, have a shower, get all fresh, clean sheets and everything else going. And then I crawled back into bed and tried to sleep some more, but we had a roofing company come to put new shingles on our roof. So they were hammering their way up on the roof above my head while I tried to sleep, and obviously that didn't work out too great. So that's kind of how the first day of my new year started out. And while it's obviously not that bad now, it hasn't got a huge amount better. I still have a lot of issues every day with pain and diarrhea and fatigue and everything that goes along with that. It has been and continues to be a pretty rough start to the latest year of my life. Now, one thing I learned pretty early on in my life is that there is an inextricable link between mental health and physical health. Obviously, we know that mental health issues lead to physical problems. For example, if you're under a ton of stress, you can develop stomach ulcers or high blood pressure or insomnia, which weakens your immune system and leads to other health issues. So that's pretty commonly known. What I have known personally is that the reverse is also true, that physical health problems lead directly to mental health problems. And I'm not telling you all of this just to whine and complain about stuff, because that's really not my style. But the reason I'm talking about it is because I think I've started to develop a new insight into that relationship. And since it would be easier for me to illustrate it for you, let me just show you what I'm talking about here. In order to best illustrate my new theory, I've drawn up this high-tech chart with an x-axis that represents the passage of time and y-axis that represents a person's mood or happiness level, which can fluctuate from a basic meh all the way upwards to everything is awesome, and all the way downwards to literally want to die. And I think that most people probably have a standard baseline that falls somewhere on this spectrum. And I would imagine that most people at the start of their lives would start off pretty high before the crushing realities of life kind of bring that baseline down a little bit. However, for myself, I started at a fairly significant disadvantage for a few different reasons. First of all, I was abused throughout my childhood, so my home was a place of violence and fear. I also had Crohn's disease from a fairly early age, so as a young kid, not only did I have to get used to chronic pain, but I also had to very quickly get accustomed to people inserting things into my rectum, such as fingers or medical instruments. I had to get used to drinking large quantities of various medical imaging solutions, and because I was a tiny little malnourished kid who had all his self-confidence beaten out of him, I was also bullied at school. So school was a place of even greater fear than my home. And the thing is, for a child who is growing up in an environment that is unsafe, for a child who doesn't have that sort of home is safety and caregivers are people of comfort and love and safety, that actually significantly impacts the physical developments of their brains. So my own mood happiness baseline early on was probably a fair bit lower than most people's would have been. And then as I experienced various medical procedures or health problems, it might dip down. But then because I was a resilient kid still, it would eventually come up to my baseline. And then every so often something good would happen. And then you get back down to the baseline again. And a lot of things would affect the mood. But again, that resilience of youth would always get the baseline moving back up again. However, with the chronic health issues that would cause repeated dips and various other really negative factors in my life, that baseline over time that I would get back to would start to become lower. And then in the late 90s, I would almost die for the first time with my first surgery, and I had a huge, significant, horrific event, and eventually over a fair bit of time I did recover my physical health. But the problem with Crohn's disease is the fact that you can't heal it. It can appear anywhere in a person's digestive system again, and so I knew that at some point in the future I might have to go through the same experience again, which meant that it was hard to have hope for the future, and it definitely put me at a new baseline as I continued to experience these things. Now, some of these physical health events in particular, they might be a particularly bad event that would put me down very low on the scale. Sometimes it might just be a long period of just bad health that would have me down for a longer period of time. And of course, there's always good things happening too. There were a couple of other times where I almost died, and eventually I would get to my second surgery, which was somehow an even worse experience than the first surgery. And that left me with a much lower baseline even. And physically I never recovered as well, like I mentioned earlier. And so it wasn't long before the health was having really bad effects again. And my new baseline, as this frequency continued on, ended up getting quite low. So this, in a nutshell, is the new sort of baseline theory I came up with in terms of the relation between mental health and physical health. And before I go on to conclude this video, I will just quickly say that if you're somewhere in this literally want to die range, the one thing that I would urge you to do is choose the single most trusted person in your life and just tell them about it. Tell them how you're feeling. And if you're sitting there thinking, there's nobody in my life that I trust, just choose the person who you would consider the highest on the most trusted list, even if that's still not a very high bar. At least find that one person that you can share your feelings with and talk about it. So with this point illustrated, I hope, let me just go back and finish up. So at this point in my life, I have pain every day. I have diarrhea every single day. The greatest challenge, I think, even worse than the constant pain, is the fatigue that comes along with everything. And it's really impossible to know how much of it is the physical fatigue of not digesting food well, of being sick all the time, and how much of it is the mental fatigue of the PTSD and having to deal with the chronic illness and everything else. So as much as I would love to be putting out at least a couple of videos a week for you, just getting a single video scripted and planned and recorded and edited every single week is quite a big challenge for my energy levels and my time. But to wrap up, we're all going to be dead very soon. It's kind of a funny thing to say, but in the grand scope of the universe, our lives are like that and they're over. Which for most people is probably a fairly depressing or even frightening thought. For me though, it's a very comforting thing to know that our lives are short, because for me, I exert so much energy getting through just a basic day every day, starting from having to crawl out of bed and then getting on with the tasks of going about my day requires such a huge effort in terms of the energy to do it. And so the effortlessness of non-existence sounds just wonderful to me, and it's something I look forward to. Now, because I have a wife and kids, I hope I'll be around a long time for them. I'll certainly keep on living for their sake. All I know is that for right now, I gotta do what I gotta do today. I don't much like to think about the future because it feels overwhelming with my energy levels as they are. And I'm also not saying it's all terrible. I have a lot of great, wonderful things in my life, the three most important of which live with me in my house. So that's just something I thought I would throw out there. And if that brings up any thoughts for you, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'm curious what you think about my little theory that I've come up with. And don't worry, I'll get back to the fun very soon. Hopefully this week I'm also going to record a video about my games played and acquired in April. So stay tuned in the near future for that. And take care of yourself, will ya? Hey, it's Josh. You know why I'm here. Sometimes you just need that friendly reminder to give a little thumb up, to subscribe to the channel, to share the video with somebody who would enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers. And it was a really nice time. We came home a couple later. And it was a really nice time, and we came home a couple hours late. Because you probably subscribed. And since it would be easier for me to illustrate alternate scenarios, and anytime I just touch it, as a result of, but anyways, I won't get off onto any side rants here. I'm trying to stick to what I'm trying to talk about. Please